Welcome back, folks. Bob McKenzie here at Fulton Woodworking. As you recall, in the last episode we focused mostly on the development and the building of the back legs for the bar stool. This time we're going to focus on the rest of the joints for the stool frame, primarily on the angled tenons, as well as coming up with the design for the seat slats and the use of the Adirondack chair frame for building the back. Let's get to the shop and see how this is done. The old adage of don't fix it if it isn't broken came into play here. Tom McLaughlin, in one of his chair building classes, also indicated that if you find a chair that's comfortable, try to just duplicate that as much as possible. Don't go into the effort of trying to redesign things. So here I am taking the curvature of the seat of the IKEA bar stool. Instead of a continuous seat, I will have 4 slats measuring roughly 3.5 inches wide and about 18 to 18.5 inches long. Here I am resawing ash to be used for the slats. Same process as for the back legs, back and forth between the bandsaw and the planer. I would be amiss if I didn't tell you that every once in a while the planer would eat one of the slats. This is the process I used in all of the cold bending. I taped down the laminate pieces just to keep them from sliding around, rolled out the glue with the paint roller just on one side, stacked them, and then put them in the form. It was taken a lot of care to make sure that I didn't get too much slippage, which is very difficult. As you can see, I use clamps both directions on this particular form. I also found that because of the tight bends, it was helpful to soak these laminate pieces in just lukewarm water for about 10 minutes, patting them dry and using them in that state. The glue, being a water-based glue, didn't have any detrimental effect on that. Here's a little trick. I keep the roller that I use to spread the glue in a plastic bag on the bottom shelf of my workbench. Here's the glue up of the back sections of the stool. The form I'm using was the one that I built to build the Adirondack chairs. As you can see, it has only one solid member. The best friend in this stool building project was the divider. I took time to build a single stool to use as the model. From that, I took all my dimensions and all my angles using the divider. My approach was to cut each member to its full length, including the tendon length, and the ends would be cut at the angle in which the joint would be made. Here I have the sacrificial fence set at the depth in which I want the shoulder cut on the tenon. I'm simply aligning the miter gauge at the angle of the end of the board. To cut the narrow shoulder on the tenon, the dado blade needs to be angled at the appropriate angle. This can be set with the dividers or simply using the edge of the board again on the saw blade. I found that I was able to get a very good smooth cut by manually aligning the shoulder up with the tooth of the blade before cutting. Flashback to that full-size drawing. This is where I got my initial angles, and eventually they evolved into the final dimensions and angles for the bar stool. Just to set everything straight, I did the mortises first and then snuck up on the tenon thicknesses to make sure I had a snug fit. Here I am marking the mortise locations. Since I use a mortising bit, I find it a lot more useful to have the center line of the mortise than the outline for chiseling. Always looking for a good snug fit. Here you can see the always present model that I've been working from, and in front all the pieces ready for the initial assembly. The two sides of the stool frame are flat. They splay out from the seat to the floor. In the assembly, I started with the simple stuff, which is the sides first. After 2 days of glue up, limited to the number of clamps I had, I was able to have all the pairs of the stool sides completed. Before I could go ahead with the final assembly, I had to make a decision on the appearance of the joints based on the rounding of the edges. I opted for the appearance of the latter two of these images, which meant I had to dry assemble the stool frames, mark where all the joints occurred, and then head over to the router table. The router bit wouldn't fit into the tight corners. Did I tell you there was hand sanding involved in this project? The assembly of the basic frame is pretty straightforward. Take note that the top two members of this do not have Morris and tendon joints. These will be doweled. I'll show you that in a little bit. The real challenge here was trying to keep those shims from sliding off before you can get the pressure with the clamps applied. Also note that the upper pieces, the glue simply was a tacking mechanism to hold them in place while I could put the dowels in. So once the glue dried, I took the whole stool assembly over to the drill press and drilled a 1/2 inch hole to accept the dowel, which would be about 3.5–4 inches in length. The brute strength and ignorance method of installing the dowels was overcome by the simple machine, the screw. And there you have 4 walnut and 2 mahogany frames ready for seats and backs. Well folks, that's all for this episode. Thanks for watching. Next time around, we'll take the backs that we formed up this time to the bandsaw and shape them into something that we can use. We'll do the same thing with the slats. We'll then install all of these. We'll put in the plugs to hide the screws. We'll finish them and we'll be all done. Remember, happy woodworking.